Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with David Frank. We're discussing national political news of the day. We're going to begin with, well, a topic that's been a subject of not just political discourse, but comedian discourse, and that's Biden's age. It has been a topic, of course, going on for months and months and months. We see I guess what we could say is gaffes being made, wandering around the stage, getting confused about names of people that he's talking to, talking about people who are dead as if they're in the room, and just getting confused during press conferences. I think more recently the issue came up with Jon Stewart's long anticipated return to The Daily Show after a 9-year hiatus. And he chose as his first topic to discuss. Actually, it wasn't just about Biden. It was about the topic. The subject matter was, what are we doing? What the F are we doing here? It was about both Trump and Biden and their downsides. And he discuss the gaffes. In fact, the first part of the joke was where he talked about a candidate having memory problems, and then went on to Trump's multiple memory lapses, not to mention his kids' memory lapses during depositions. But it created a big backlash from supporters. Keith Olbermann said, "Why don't you go away for another 9 years?" And I forget what other pundits weren't happy with him, but a number of people who feel that he's playing into the Republican lines, didn't care that he also attacked Trump. But again, then Biden is also turned down an opportunity to have an interview at the Super Bowl, and it's usually not a very tough interview. And he gave that opportunity up, and one wonders if he can't handle that interview. Is he going to be able to handle the debates? And Nate Silver is now basically saying, look, you need to do some tough interviews. And that doesn't mean hostile interviews, but you need to do some tough interviews to show that you are up for the job, or you need to stand down, or his exact words. Dave?
Thank you for that setup. Yeah, I think that this has been an ongoing story, and so some folks might think that the timing is random, but realistically, it's not random. I think that this issue took a pivotal turn recently. In part, I think what flagged it for our attention was, in fact, someone as skilled in reading the tea leaves and interpreting the data when it comes to public opinion surveys and polling. Nate Silver, he's sort of like the gold standard. I know some folks think he's a little overhyped, but the truth is his article, Nate Silver the article about him in The Hill was titled, "Nate Silver Urges Biden Reassure Voters or Stand Down." And so it's something that people are taking very seriously. And in fact, Ezra Klein from the New York Times, which is typically sort of an establishment benchmark in terms of media, and favorable to the administration in almost all cases, that Ezra Klein actually did produce a piece recently where he says, his heart goes out to President Biden. He's done an amazing job. Like, he did the softest sort of intro that you could expect, but then his pivot was, in reality, people within the Democratic Party need to take a real hard look at the public perception of Biden's fitness and electability. So that's really what it comes down to. I think that's why we're covering it. And yes, I think the Jon Stewart piece was timely because he was sort of the conscience of a generation for a while. For folks that don't remember, he's been away 9 years. It seems I can't believe it's been 9 years. But for a decade or more before that, he really was. I remember the stat out there that a majority of young people, I think people under 35, the majority said that their primary news source was the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. So it's
Yeah.
not a small a voice out there. And he basically, like you said, he said, well, what are we doing? Like, what is actually happening here? And they when you have about 85% of respondents, depending on the survey, between 2/3 and 85%, which is the whole bell curve, people saying that they think that like I said, the fitness, Biden's fitness itself, and we're not talking about athletics, we're talking about mostly mental here, but also mobility. I mean, when you watch him, there's evidence of aging. I would say that this is a very real and huge inflection point. Now, politically speaking, in terms of the mechanics of politics, we can get into it. I'll just give you a real brief, take on it, and then you could run with it. But people are saying that the only way he's going to not be the candidate would be if he chooses to step down. And knowing human nature, knowing Biden as a public figure, he's not going to step down willingly. So he's going to continue through the primary season and accumulate as many delegates as he can, lock up the nomination and beyond, and kind of rally the party together. But when they show up at the convention, there will be an opportunity for reflection. And I can tell you a little bit more, but I'll let you kind of
Yeah.
give us your take on that.
Well, first I want to go back to Jon Stewart for a minute, and let's remember, yes, he is an influential voice, but it's comedy. I mean, and the fact that it's being reflected in comedy, he's not the only comedian that's pointed this stuff out. All the other comedians have made jokes about it too. It's an ongoing joke, and in fact, his gaffes go way back, even before age was an issue. It's always been a theme with him, but Nate Silver, that's maybe a little bit more serious because he's saying this. John Fetterman, I don't know if you saw his troll tweet against Nate Silver. He said Silver needs to reassure the American public that he's capable of predicting political races that aren't on easy mode, or he needs to stand down. And it has a picture of the 538 prediction of him losing, and the final results, which were much different, right? So it's and granted, Nate Silver bombed on the Gavin Newsom recall. I mean, like 15 points off as to where they predicted. But again, Silver's isn't even saying that Biden should step down. He's saying you need to do something to, if this is just an impression, a false impression, you need to do something to basically mitigate that. And that's undeniable. He should not have given up the Super Bowl opportunity. There's no excuse for that.
Yeah, so I'll comment on this, and then I'll obviously throw back to you more quickly about the sort of what's going to happen in terms of the political mechanics. I agree with you that the Super Bowl it's illustrative, I think, of where the White House, the re-election team finds itself, and to their credit, I think that they feel that they're doing the right thing by, to a certain extent, sheltering Joe Biden from situations that might be embarrassing or would give them an opportunity to fumble the ball, so to speak. In fact, it's been happening more frequently and more obviously that when he's drawing on, a concept he's trying to convey, he's not doing it very successfully. And everybody has that. We like if you go on Jeopardy, for example, chances are you and I would forget half of what we know because of the stress. Like being president is very difficult. Drawing on your memory on the fly in the heat of the moment is difficult. But I think when it comes to, again, the issue of electability, what we're seeing is people are, to a certain extent, losing confidence, especially in light of other factors like his attachment to the names of the past, that people say, oh, well, he's trying to think of France, he's trying to think of Germany, he's getting a generation behind in his recall. Well, when he thinks about Israel, when he thinks about his relationship with Netanyahu, or when he thinks about Russia, Ukraine, and he thinks about the Cold War, that's what we're getting. We're getting somebody who's thinking about the past. Now, you could interpret that positively as wisdom in when the ducks are in the row and you're saying the right things and you're sharp and articulate. But when you are sort of stumbling in your thought process and not necessarily coming through as that voice of clarity, it raises questions about this. And so people are saying that that it makes sense to demonstrate that you have capacity. And so we have a great example now coming up. We have the State of the Union address. Granted, he's going to be, and I think it's a couple days after Super Tuesday, the 7th. So he'll have an opportunity. Now he'll just be reading off a teleprompter, but it'll be a relatively friendly audience. But at least he can kind of maybe reboot a little bit, that
Yeah.
he can carry himself with some degree of charisma.
Yeah, and of course it doesn't count. Some of his defenders are saying, well, he was fine through the first, 30 minutes of the press conference. Yeah, but that's not what's going to be played over and over again. You got to be fine through the whole thing. Now, real quickly, I want to say, yes, as the Daily Show made clear, Trump has the gaffes too, but Trump's gaffes are baked in. The people who think he's crazy already think he's crazy.
Yeah.
The people think he's a stable genius think he's a stable genius. There's nobody who's going to be convinced one way or another. So he isn't going to be as impacted by it, most likely. Although one thing I've noticed, and actually a couple of other commenters have noticed, he hasn't made the Sleepy Joe argument lately. I think his handlers have told him, careful about making that argument, because if you do, you will be scrutinized more on that point. Because he hasn't really been doing that as much, in fact, at all. So we'll see how much he can discipline himself on that. But he, at any rate, but that's why with him, it's baked in. We know what to expect and what not to expect. We know he rambles, and so it's not going to have the same impact. And he's not president right now.
Yeah, and he's a disruptor too. So all the things he's for the folks who are his supporters, the MAGA base we talk about is about a third of the Republican Party, but that the vast majority of the party, I think 70% or more, go along with the ride because it's a known at this point. So there's that the fact that Trump can be himself and it's not going to hurt him, versus on the Democratic Party side, independents, people who sit on the sideline, maybe discouraged voters who may come out to vote based on certain issues or demands, like for example abortion and other issues that are clearly tracking in favor of President Biden's policies. Then so the question is, are they going to be inspired? And I think that's why this has come up as such a big issue now. And so I do want to, I know I'm not sure exactly how much time we have left, but I do want to pivot to the mechanics of it because of what I heard over the weekend. And it was his presidential historian, David Brinkley, was commenting on, they were discussing presidential rankings that recently came out, which, among other things. But one of the things that he said was, hey, look, there's this talk about how could this even happen? What is the mechanics of President Biden going through the primaries, collecting, almost all the delegates, being at the convention? Who could take it away from him at that point? And the truth is, it doesn't sound like anybody could. But could he be convinced that it's in a national? He didn't use the word emergency, but that basically what would be the conditions under which something different would go down at the convention. And what he said was, Biden is historically low in terms of approval, and it bodes, poorly for his chances to get reelected. If that trend continued, if his support got down to 20%, right now his approval rating I think is about 33-ish%. I think that was below Carter's at about 37% when he lost his reelection. If something tragic were to happen where he I would argue if something like, say, Senator Mitch McConnell, where he just froze and went quiet for a while, something like that. if that were to happen, he said that there's, and I don't know where this came from, but it was the first I heard of it. What would sort of the bailout plan be at the convention? And he threw out there like, well, saying the quiet part out loud, they're talking about Michelle Obama and Admiral McRaven. So he was the former head of special forces in Europe. He was the former European, commander of European forces. He ran a special project in NATO that was trying to align all the NATO members' militaries with U.S. priorities, and so that's the bailout plan. The bailout plan is to bring Michelle Obama and Barack Obama back into the White House with Admiral McRaven as vice president, as like a national security consideration. And I think that is the bailout plan. But what he did say is that it would be it's childish to think that would happen, that Biden would do that voluntarily. It would have to be an involuntary transition.
Friends, I'm proud to greet you from Ukraine, from our capital city of Kyiv, a city that is under missile and airstrikes from Russian troops every day, but it doesn't give up. And I have the honor to greet you on behalf of the Ukrainian people, brave and freedom-loving people who for 8 years have been resisting the Russian aggression. Those who give their best sons and daughters to stop this full-scale Russian invasion. Right now, the destiny of our country is being decided. The destiny of our people.
So as we've discussed on this show, the aid package to Ukraine, which is passed in the Senate, looks to be boxed up in the House and possibly not pass. It appears that it is not headed towards an easy passage, although a lot of pressure is being put on the Republicans to do so. And a couple of factors that may actually put pressure on them is are the fact that a key town in the Donetsk area has fallen. Reports that the Ukraine military is running out of ammunition is low, and that they are losing ground. But also Alexei Navalny's death. He made in my opinion, really stupid decision to return to Russia and was imprisoned and died in prison, most likely killed by the authorities. And even if he wasn't, there's no way anybody is going to conclude otherwise. And so the question is, and to universal condemnation around the world. To everybody. Even Trump had to make some mention of him in his social media post, although all he did was mention the death and then go on to talk about how America is a declining country for all kinds of reasons. And so, but the question is this is a very serious matter that comes on the heels of the softball Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin, the Republicans are a little bit on the defensive. They also happen to be on break right now, and they're a little bit on the defensive about that. And Biden is putting them on the defensive about that. The question is whether or not all of these factors can lead to the aid package, which involves $60 billion to Ukraine, I think $30 billion to Israel, I think something like $7 billion to the Pacific to defend Taiwan, and then some amount, I'm forgetting how much, to the border, because for whatever reason that has to be part of a foreign aid package. There are talks that if this fails, that the Democrats want to redo it as a standalone $60 billion aid straight to Ukraine and just keep putting them on the defensive about this. Ukraine uh, clearly needs it by all indications. It's not just what Ukraine is reporting, but what international agencies are reporting. Is this going to make it in the House? And it's really unclear as to what his fate is in the House.
Yes. So I think getting us up to the point where this bill is in the House, it's in their court. I think that's the frame of reference here, that we can look at the unfortunate events surrounding Navalny's death. Most every source that's out there says that this appears to have been obviously politically motivated murder from an authoritarian Putin. There's everyone's saying the death is in his hands, blood is on his hands. The fact that it happened on the first day of the Munich Security Conference, to me, I don't, there are coincidences. I don't think this is one of them. I think it's a strong message. So it galvanizes NATO, and I think it actually is a bit of a wake up call to Republican Party here in the U.S. that the political electioneering gamesmanship around the border and around these foreign aid packages, they need to look under the basically do a check on their values about what's most important, and this is a historic moment in Ukraine because of what you had said, that there is a Russian advance. There was apparently a near 10-to-1 material advantage. Ukrainians are in a tough spot without the aid. NATO has stepped up and committed. I think the number is about 50 billion, and the United States was going to do something similar. So it's not a question of if, but when. I believe that to be the case, that you've got a strong enough contingent of Republicans to kind of make it happen, but they have got to get their house in order. So there's that piece of it. Two elements of this, why I say this, and they're GOP related. One is that we just had last week Tucker Carlson kind of spinning his own narrative about the state of living in Russia, the Russian system, interviewing Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, and almost to a certain, I think he did a better job than people give him credit for. But at the same time, it was platforming an authoritarian that we're currently at war with indirectly. So the timing is awful at best. And so secondarily to that, you've got Liz Cheney out there, for example, this past weekend. Yeah. Talking about, the traditional GOP's need to strengthen their position on this, and people need to sort of realize. Now, granted, she's talking about Donald Trump's lock on the party's policies, but she's trying to break that lock in the name of actual, global strategic needs for the West, for NATO allies and the United States. So that's coming to the surface now. And lastly, I'll add this, and just to throw it out there to you. Over the weekend, Senator Lindsey Graham did say, hey, look, we know that we need a bill here. It's just that, and then he gave some conditions about changes on the border bill. For example, making sure no migrants are able to come to the United States, that they have to wait outside the border for their hearing. That seems to be something to get some of the GOP on board. But also, he talked about more loans than grants. Which we could talk about. I think that when you are granting a country foreign aid for military weaponry and material, and you're giving them your old stuff, that money really comes down to buying new stuff for the United States. Yeah. And so it's a lot of it is brinksmanship. But when you come down to the nitty gritty, it sounds like at least leadership in the Senate thinks that the House will come up with a bill.
Yeah, I think so. They do seem to be looking towards it that way, and I'm also not seeing the bellicose opposition to it coming even from the Freedom Caucus at this point. I think that they know that they've got to do something. They're going to scream about the border, of course, and they definitely want to have all of the Trump stuff that is Trump policies that are listed in the Mayorkas impeachment restored. But again, they know. I think they know they have to not play games with this. They're in an election year. There are a lot of swing state Republicans that are really concerned about this, and and Biden is probably winning the narrative on this, that the losses in Ukraine are the fault of Republican games playing. It's only a matter of time. The Republicans haven't even been trying to counter with that. I mean, you look at the Freedom Caucus people, you go online and they say, well, it's because Zelensky's been pocketing the money, blah, 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 all those lines. But Republicans in office can't afford to say that. I don't even see Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that right now. So it's yeah, they know they've got to do something, and I think the Democrats will probably just not give too much up. They've already gave up enough in that border bill. They're not going to. I don't think they're going to give anything else up. And so the question is, what can the Republicans do and still claim it a victory for themselves? But Navalny's death has changed things. That in combination with Zelensky. Senator Vance, who won, has refused to meet with Zelensky. He's being called out as a coward for that. Trump, Zelensky offered to bring Trump to the front lines. No response. I mean, they know they have to do something. So something is going to happen. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they'll get in there and they start caucusing, and then they'll get stupid again. It's hard to know.
Yeah, people were somewhat backhandedly, or I don't want to judge it. Just to say that people were talking about J.D. Vance, what he said in Munich, the fact that he did refuse to meet with Zelensky and his foreign minister. His position on this appears to be, from his own words, that the United States can't produce enough munitions to make a difference in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and that the sooner we realize that a peace treaty is really how this is going to end, the better, and that must, by definition, include a concession on southeastern portion of Ukraine, territorial settlement with Russia. And I think that the word that I saw in the European version of Politico on this was that's verboten. Like, nobody in the Western Alliance that is a leader or a member of the NATO foreign policy coalition ever says that. But I did hear about 6 or 9 months ago someone say that in Germany, after World War II, when the Soviets had occupied Eastern Germany and Berlin was split, that was a concession that was made for pragmatic reasons, and that it took a long time, but Germany is now reunited. Germany is now whole. And that if you play the very long game, your very worst option is to keep a little bit of hope alive for a longer period after some sort of ceasefire. That said, I don't see that as a position that anybody in this administration, I'm not hearing it from anybody other than maybe J.D. Vance and a few other people, that they think that that's actually the right way to go. Clearly, our country and NATO allies are that verboten word makes a lot of sense. That it's not something that is going to be entertained by this administration, by existing leadership. And so I'll say one last thing about J.D. Vance here is that he is obviously tied himself to Trump's victory in this regard. He's sort of I don't know. Again, I don't want to judge, but he's basically thinking to himself, the only way he gets away with this is if Trump wins, and that's the reality we face come Election Day in November.
He's all in. That's his line, and it's been since he was running for office. That's the ship he's in. I will say, though, that the difference between the long game play with East Berlin and East Germany is that they were all ethnic Germans. The problem with Crimea, maybe not so much Donbass, but Crimea, is that after the starvation policies of the 1930s, Crimea was populated with ethnic Russians, and they are the majority ethnic there even before the invasion in 2014. So that might be a harder long game to play, but again, it's just and again, making any type of concession like that to Putin probably won't end that way. I don't know that I would compare it to the Anschluss, but that does come to mind. But as we say, though, that's we kind of getting off track there. Even if your position is that there needs to be a peace treaty negotiated, that doesn't support Vance's position, because you got to negotiate with some idea of strength. If you've got weapons to at least extend the fight, you're negotiating from a better place of position of strength. And and right now the Republican position is no money to Ukraine, because that's the Trump position, and that's the bind that they're in. Maybe Trump will ease up on that position, but he couldn't even talk about Navalny without attacking the liberals. I mean, that's
right.
just.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go down that Trump road, only because I think he's just a pure political animal. His instincts are that he's inclined towards authoritarianism, and that his own sort of his own path, his own electoral.
And it also plays into the conspiracy theories that he's owned by Putin for right. all those reasons. I don't know necessarily that that's true, but it's certainly one more data point in those theories.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he's just sort of defaults to alignment with people who see the world in the way that he does, that might makes right, to a certain extent. But getting back to the actual logistics of what is it, how do you negotiate from a position of strength? Everything that I've seen is that the United States has tried not to provoke Putin by giving long-range weapons, missiles to Ukraine, but now we're seeing that's what was picked up on day one at Munich, that now the United States is no longer going to worry about provoking Putin, that he in a sense provoked the West by murdering Navalny. That sort of narrative is that, look, he's not interested in statesmanship. He's actually a rogue authoritarian that they're considering putting on the terrorist watch list. Biden had threatened at one point in the past that there'd be devastating consequences if Navalny was murdered while in custody. And so the talk is now try to ratchet up putting the Russian state itself on the terrorist watch list. So many billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars of oil are being sold to our allies if he were truly put on if Russia was removed from the global financial system. I don't know if that's possible, but it's certainly being discussed. But also these long-range weapons. Right now, the Ukrainian military can't reach deep into Crimea, nor can they reach behind the lines sufficiently far enough to actually disrupt supply lines, etc. So Russia has sort of a tactical advantage, like when you have a junkyard dog that's tied to a chain tethered in the ground, and how far his bite reaches. So Russia can do anything it wants right outside that bite. I think sort of taking the gloves off, so to speak, and unleashing long range weapons, at least tactically, we could support. In the United States and the West could change the conditions on the ground, and that would be an improvement from the perspective of NATO, the West, the United States, and the alliance.
Everybody's still wondering how they took out that bridge last year, though. But who knows? So it'll be maybe after the war they'll reveal that. But again, apparently the Biden administration is about to announce new sanctions that are going possibly aimed at the banking system and the rest, but it's going to take more than sanctions. I know that this summer the planes that we've been promising, the training, is supposed to be ready. Whether or not that'll be a game changer, we'll find out then.
Well, I don't think that you have a straight-up Muslim ban as much as you look at the countries that have terrorist activity that want to hurt Americans. You can ban those people from those countries. That's the way we should look at it, is which countries are a threat to us. You look at what came across the southern border. What worries me the most are those that came from Iran, from Yemen, from Lebanon. Those areas where they say death to America. That's where you want to be careful. It's not about a religion. It's about a fact that certain countries are dangerous and are threats to us. A president has one job, and that's to keep Americans safe. And that's what we've got to do, is make sure that we have good national security in that process. And that's the way you should look at it, is where the terrorist threats are, how we're going to deal with it, and what we're doing about it. And the biggest threat we have right now is communist China. But you have to also look at what Iran and Russia are doing as well. And we need to be paying attention to that.
Final segment. Nikki Haley's endgame. What is she playing for? Obviously, she's not playing to be the VP candidate for Trump.
No.
She has attacked his fitness. She is attacking right now the Republicans in general on the issue that we spoke of in the last segment. And she is saying she's not going to pull out of the race anytime soon. Trump just said that her campaign is out of gas, but it's just been reported that she raised almost $17 million in January, not a huge amount, but enough to continue to go at least through Super Tuesday. She is, and she continues to attack him. Basically, called him a bully today, and said that that he's just getting meaner and more vicious. These are not the type of attacks that you make when you're expecting to be the VP candidate, or expecting to have an opportunity to speak even at the Republican convention. I don't know. Is she possibly, now that Manchin has pulled out, do you think she's possibly looking towards no labels, or is it an even longer game plan, as we've kind of discussed? Will she come back in 4 years and say, "See, I told you so"? Now, reward me for my ability to predict where we were and let me lead you now, kind of a thing. I don't know. I mean, she's definitely, between her and Liz Cheney, they're both on the attack against not just Trump at this point, but about the Republicans for the acquiescence to MAGA. What is she trying to play for?
I think that my original impulse back when there were more candidates in the race, and that all of those other candidates were trying to walk that tightrope with one foot on the shore, one foot on the boat, whatever your metaphor is, that they realized that the solidity of the base beneath Donald Trump is, in effect, also the party is beholden to that base. The Republican Party is pivoting to the position where it's becoming Trump's party. And one data point there is that his daughter-in-law may, in fact, become the co-chair, and then they'd be able to have more control over the money funneling through the party to him. And they've even come out recently, I forgot who reported it, but that that's going to be their goal. I think it was one of Trump's communications people said that, like, that's our goal. Number one is to make sure everybody knows that Nikki Haley's out. And number two, make sure everybody knows that this party is Donald Trump's. So they're already saying that quiet part out loud. So the question is, what's Nikki Haley got left? At one point, I thought she was, again, trying to hold on to say, hey, I put up the big, I fought the good fight. I got some delegates. I'm high up in the party. Trump, you could pick me. But obviously that's not what she wants. And so she's actually picked a side. She's picked the Liz Cheney side, the traditional GOP side, the establishment, not the table flipping Trump disruptor side. So what is the end game? Well, she did a press conference today. I just saw the headlines, but the idea is that she's saying, I'm not going to drop out after South Carolina on Saturday, and I'm not going to drop out. I'm going to see this thing after Super Tuesday, March 5th. I'm going to see this thing through. And so the question is, just imagine the Republican convention where she's been saying things about Trump, against Trump, which to a certain extent is going to undermine the party itself. And all along the way, she's going to have to be saying things about particular legislators who are attached, like you said, attach themselves to that horse. So what is the end game? My hunch, like you said, you alluded to, is that there is an opportunity for some candidate to do a no labels, just play a third party role that really shakes things up. And it could, in theoretically, prevent either of the two candidates from getting all of what they need, if they're able to in some way really disrupt some of these later states. It just doesn't look like that's what's happening. It looks like it's going to be Trump gets his nomination and Biden gets his nomination, and they have what they need. So it's to me, I would say her end game is to just be next in line, similar but not identical to the way Gavin Newsom is kind of
Mhm.
next in line.
Yeah, I mean, unless she's looking to be, I don't think she's playing to be a lobbyist. That's because she's burning bridges there too. Is she doing it for a book deal? I don't know. Or maybe she's doing it out of some kind of principle. I think she made a mistake. If she'd attacked him earlier in the same way that she's attacking him now, she might be in a better position. But I think she's kind of messed up. Going too gentle early on, like all of them did. But none of them want. I think they were all kind of hoping the other would be the one to attack and then take the brunt of it. But they, like I said, they all waited too long, and he became the nominee. I do.
Chris Christie, I'll just add real quick. Chris Christie tried that and scared everybody away, I think.
Yeah, but Christie wasn't trying to even be president. He was hoping that Trump would show up to the debates so he could do what he did to Marco Rubio 8 years ago, right? He was in there solely to take Trump down, and he's probably the main reason Trump didn't show up to the debates. So it's no, Chris Christie had no problem with it, but that's he's a rhino, right? So that is, yeah, I think Haley is in a little bit better position than Cheney. Cheney was disgraced because she participated in the Democrat January 6th committee, and Haley hasn't said a whole lot about January 6th. She even continues to say that she would pardon Trump to move on, right? And that's where where she veers differently. Comparing her to Cheney in that respect, I don't know. I'm not. I'm not sure that she could ever get the nomination, and I wonder if she has to understand that, even with the differences. I mean, what do you think?
You talking about Cheney?
No, I'm talking about Haley.
Not get the nomination under the current scenario by this June.
Unspoken part. She's a woman. She is not white, and her origins are not Christian. I mean, when she talked about her what was it, Hindu roots, some of the evangelists said, "You have to make up your mind. Are you Hindu or Christian?" Right? And she was just talking about it in a cultural capacity. I think she is not, at least in the Republican Party in its current incarnation. I just don't see that she could get nominated even in 2028.
Gotcha. So I do think there are challenges for her. I saw a video put together from when she was South Carolina governor, and they showed that she was giving speech after speech against unions, saying that she would do everything she could to fight the unions. And Boeing, she invited Boeing to come into the state and give them a sweetheart tax deferral deal to relocate production manufacturing there. She was proud of that fight, and it was like an eternal fight, and she was rewarded by Boeing with a board seat after that. So there is a lane in the Republican Party that looks at that, the Trump's base, but more than that, a bigger percentage of today's Republican Party does not look kindly on that, and her attacks on Trump will add to that. The question is, will the silent majority, I would argue, within the Republican Party, if there were momentum to kind of take the party back, pro Chamber of Commerce, pro Wall Street, pro business interests, then that would not be a disqualifier. So, I don't have a strong feeling about whether she would be sort of never eligible, based on what you had said, being a woman of color, being a non-Christian, having non-Christian origins. I think she's a sympathetic figure in part now because Trump is continuing to say things like call out her husband for being involved in national service in a combat zone, like ridiculing her and her family about why isn't he by your side? He knows is what Trump said, and that's sort of personal attacks. I think people, if you look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and you say, is that really a bad thing that her husband's serving the country? Like, I think there's some slander out there about their relationship and the fidelity that Trump's trying to tap into without overtly saying it. But that's really, it should be beneath the process. I don't think that this Republican Party is perpetually or permanently in crisis. I think that they'll pull out of it at some point. But I don't know. I wouldn't disqualify her. For 2028.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, they come close. They had when the whole campaign started, they had a record diversity, more diverse than any Democratic panel, right? But you didn't even see the Republican Party mentioning that. The media had to mention it, right? They didn't want to brag about how they were better than the Democrats at that, right? Because they didn't even want to make notice of it, because one by one, the people of color, the candidates of color, were the ones that ended up dropping out. I mean, they didn't have a chance. So I don't know. I think it would have to be a totally different party, and what it's going to take to do that. Now, things happen pretty quickly. The black vote moved from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party pretty much in 4 years. From 1928, the majority supported Hoover, to 1932, but that took some very drastic events and the New Deal to do that. Now, by 1936, it was way undecided, and they never looked back. I think Kennedy was at the lowest point with like 67%, and then Johnson had over 90%. So 95% or something ridiculous. So it's but it doesn't take long for there to be a realignment. But I just, again, there is a cultural entrenchment that I think that she's up against, but maybe she feels she can change it. But there's going to be a lot of resentment, and maybe she's hoping that a lot of the MAGA people who are engaged now won't be engaged then once Trump is out of the picture.
A couple things here. One is that we do have the South Carolina primary coming up. Trump is, I think, favored by huge margins.
30 points at least.
Yeah. So by taking a shellacking in her own home state, I in a prior show, I'd mentioned that I thought there would be a natural time for her to drop out, just to sort of save face a little bit, but I think that that ship has sailed. So Trump gets a huge advantage there. As a reminder, on the Democratic Party side, that's a space where Democrats feel that the population is very receptive to coming out and really supporting this Democratic administration. So there's that piece of it, and then I would also mention too that generally speaking, I think back of an envelope estimate over the last decades or so, that about 90% black people are voting for Democrats at the national level, but that under this current contest, that's slipping. I think down near about 15% loss. Mostly black males are trending towards Trump and that sort of authoritarian style, that flip the table style of politics that he promotes. So it depends on the leadership, and maybe it's the optimist in me, but there are younger, more passionate voices out there in both parties that are aspirational in healing and repairing this trench warfare we've got going on, and the all bets are off when it comes to that horseshoe, that political horseshoe that connects the right and the left. So we are used to talking about politics as a linear process. You're either far right or far right or far left,
Right.
but in fact there's a lot of shared values, or at least potential common interest across the aisle. We obviously see it in the center right and the center left. That's how
Yeah.
traditional politics works, is that, the agenda setting of what stays off the agenda is what keeps the center held together, is that, we're not going to change things. We're not going to disrupt things. But if there's a, for example, if people look at economic values, if people look at just, like I said, healing and repairing certain things that we're supposed to be, profoundly supportive of in our democratic, in our principles, our American historic founding fathers principles, and that evolution, and sort of what Martin Luther King talked about, the path of history, arc of history bending towards justice. If we really believe that in that, then that's a crossover set of policies.
I do want to wait and see how it actually plays out in the election. I do recall when Reagan in 1984, actually Mondale only got 87% of the black vote. And then I was hearing stories back then about the migration, how this was going to be the turnaround, and the Democrats were going to lose a black vote. I've been hearing it ever since, and we hear about it and we see polling trends in it. I will believe it when I see it in an actual election vote. Now, it did happen a little bit in 2020. Did people actually switch their votes from 2016, or were people introduced from who hadn't voted before in all of those categories? Because as we've discussed on the show, Trump gained in every category except for the white vote, where he lost significantly in it. And I don't want to rehash that just yet. We will be rehashing that as we get closer to the election. But but I think that in general, she'll probably she's committed. She says, at least through Super Tuesday. Her best chance was New Hampshire, though. We all know that. I don't know if she's going to try to hit any particular state. She's going to lose big because most of the Republican primaries are winner take all, not proportionate. So, but I guess we'll see what happens in terms of when she exits and what she does.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
This takes us to our final segment, predictions. Dave, what do you have?
So this week, I think that there's been enough of changing conditions on the ground and enough of the political sentiment within the Republican Party that they realize the need and benefit of a compromise when it comes to border security, foreign aid bill that includes all three theaters, the Middle East, Europe, and also Asia Pacific region, and that they will that they will come up with a compromise. I think that now seems almost inevitable, and in part this is because of how the conditions in all three places just continue to be awful, and it's almost inevitable that we have to do something, and that I think the GOP realizes this, and that we'll see a compromise bill within 2 weeks.
All right, I'm going to change my previous prediction. I had predicted that it would be an all-Democrat Senate race in November, but I'm watching the polls and some of the ways that the debates have gone. The Republicans do seem to be consolidating around Steve Garvey. The other Republicans are fading into the lower single digits. Katie Porter is moving up, but not proportionate to Steve Garvey. Barbara Lee stays at 9% as Schiff and the other top three are gaining. I don't see that Porter's going to be able to make a significant move to surpass Garvey. So I do think Adam Schiff will come in first, Steve Garvey second, Katie Porter third. and maybe Barbara Lee will break 10%. And we'll see if those things happen. We'll be discussing them on future shows. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.